Welcome back, everybody. It's Zach here, bringing you guys another fantasy football video. This time I'm going to be going over the worst draft pick in every single round. I went through the current ADPs on Fantasy Pros and just sort of went 1 through 12, 13 through 24, and so on through the first 8 rounds, and sort of just put together a list of players that I think are the worst players to be drafted in each round. Earlier this week, I put out a video going over each of the best players I think there are to take in each round, so that was a really fun video. Fun to look back at sort of how I did last year on these as well. It was a lot of fun. But it's a fun exercise doing this, just sort of seeing which players I'm looking to avoid and target in specific rounds. And then obviously I'll make sure to update this. I'll do one more follow up on this video, probably mid late July, maybe early August as we get towards the meat of actual draft season and give you guys some more up to date opinions. But it's really fun to see where ADPs are right now and sort of see how things are going to shake out. So really fun exercise. And if you guys disagree or agree with anything I have to say, just let me know in the comments. And yeah, let's have a good time here. So yeah, with that, let's get into the first round. So starting things off with who I believe is the worst draft pick to make in round one this season, and that's going to be Garrett Wilson. And listen, I'm not here to tell you that Garrett Wilson is not an elite player. He truly is an elite NFL wide receiver. He's first in NFL history in targets through the first 2 years of his career, and there's a reason for that. He's an extremely talented player. I'm not denying that at all, and I think he's going to have a really great NFL career going forward. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to turn into a really high-end fantasy performance this season. Aaron Rodgers will be returning for the New York Jets this season, coming off of that torn Achilles, and obviously, that should mean overall better things for this offense, but I think in general it's reasonable to assume that passing volume as a whole in this offense is going to go down. The Jets, believe it or not, ranked 11th in pass attempts in the NFL last season. Rodgers, just for context, in 2022 with the Green Bay Packers, ranked 18th in the NFL. And on top of that, I think it's reasonable to assume that this is going to be an even more run-heavy team than that. The formula for this team is going to be for Aaron Rodgers to be efficient, throw the ball 25 times a game, and really lean on Breece Hall in that running game. So I think in general, we're going to see a very significantly decreased volume here for Garrett Wilson, and that means that for Garrett Wilson to pay off at his ADP, which is in the first round, the 11th pick overall, going as the 8th wide receiver off the board, you're going to need Rodgers to be insanely efficient. You're going to need Garrett Wilson to probably put up near double-digit touchdowns, and we just haven't seen that from Garrett Wilson so far. Garrett Wilson in his short 2 year career so far has yet to finish inside the top 30 at the position. He's been wide receiver 30 and wide receiver 38 each of the last 2 seasons, and he's obviously capable of putting up better numbers than that, but on limited volume with what should be a more talented wide receiver room behind him. They drafted Malachi Corley in the third round this season. Mike Williams came over in free agency. There should be more target competition, so you maybe won't see that full 30% target share for Garrett Wilson this season. And on top of that, you're going to see a less passing volume in general. Who even knows how good Aaron Rodgers is actually going to be? I think this will be an okay to maybe slightly above average offense, but it's not one that I'm projecting to be absolutely fantastic. And for that reason, I just don't see Garrett Wilson putting up top 10 numbers at the position, and that's going to make it really tough for me to justify drafting him in round one. Next up in round two, we've got Devon Achane, who I believe is the worst draft pick to make in the second round right now. And again, this is another player that I think is extremely talented, and it really hurts me to say that I'm not targeting Devon Achane because I do think he's going to have some really explosive weeks this season. He's probably going to be a guy that 3 or 4 times this year is going to win you your matchup, and that's obviously something that we want to have on our fantasy rosters, but the problem is you have to draft him at the RB8 going right at like the mid to end portion of round two, and that means you're drafting him as your running back one unless you manage to go RB in the first 2 rounds, which means you're obviously going to be really thin at wide receiver after that. But the issue here is I just don't think he's going to surpass 15 touches a game. I think it wouldn't shock me at all to say that Raheem Mostert might end up leading his backfield in touches again, assuming health for all of these running backs. And there are just a lot of wide receivers and running backs being drafted around or after him that I'm super excited about. At the running back position, we can look at guys like Josh Jacobs, Derrick Henry, Travis Etienne, James Cook, all of whom are talented players in their own right and have a far more direct route to just having a lot of touches in their offenses. Josh Jacobs could easily be a guy that pushes for double-digit touchdowns, should be the workhorse there. We know Derrick Henry is going to get a ton of work near the goal line. Travis Etienne is a true workhorse back, and James Cook's a guy that's probably going to see 15 to 20 touches a game as well. So it's going to be really tough for Devon Achane to outperform all of those guys. And again, that's assuming he even takes on a larger role in this offense than what we saw last season. We didn't really see him break the 10 touch threshold all that much last season, and I know it didn't matter because he averaged over 8 yards per carry. He's clearly an elite NFL talent, but 8 yards per carry is not something that's going to be sustainable over the course of this guy's entire career. If you think back to like the most efficient running backs in NFL history, we've got Jamal Charles, Nick Chubb. Those guys average just north of 5 yards per carry, so you're not going to see a guy average 8 yards per carry over the course of his entire career. I bet we'll see Devon Achane closer to that 5 yards per carry mark this season, and that's still obviously extremely efficient. It's still obviously a great number to put up, but it's just going to be really tough for him to put up high-end fantasy numbers where you just aren't going to be. He's not going to be a player that you can rely on a weekly basis. Is my primary point here. He's not going to be a guy that's going to be a week in and week out performer for your roster. He's going to be a really frustrating player to start because you're going to feel like you've got to start him every single week because of that upside, and he's probably going to let you down more often than not just because the volume won't be there. So if he's your running back 2 or your running back 3, I think that's a perfectly great way to build your roster. But because you have to take him in round 2, I just don't think it makes all that much sense, and for that reason, I'd be avoiding him this season. Next up in round 3, we've got Stefon Diggs, who is the player that I believe is the worst draft pick to make in round 3. And round 3 was actually the toughest round for me to pick here, and that's just because I don't necessarily hate any of the players going in this range. You've got a couple of quarterbacks coming off the board. We see Sam Laporta and Travis Kelce in this range. A lot of the running backs I mentioned earlier, and guys like Josh Jacobs, Derrick Henry, Travis Etienne, a lot of good players in this range, but Stefon Diggs sort of stood out to me as the player that I'm just least excited about because he's being drafted at the top of round 3 at pick 25, and he's coming off of a disaster of a second half of last season where he really was just not a player that you could trust at all in your fantasy lineups. Over the back half of last season, he's entering his age 31 season. He's going to turn 31 in November this season, and that's not quite towards the age cliff where we're looking at wide receivers just completely turning into dust, but he's at that age as well where we can't just ignore a bad half of the season and just write it off as just bad luck. There is a very real possibility here that Stefon Diggs just lost a step. Just watching him play, he didn't look like the same Stefon Diggs of the back half of last season than what he was even earlier on in the season. And there is just a very significant risk with a guy like this where we see it all the time where these players just sort of turn into dust out of nowhere. Think back to Julio Jones right after his age 30 season. Really difficult to project these guys being continuously good going forward after their age 30 season. And on top of that, there is a lot of target competition in Houston. I know they're going to be a really good offense. And they're going to throw the ball a ton, but Nico Collins just received a massive 3-year extension. He's clearly, in my eyes, the wide receiver 1 in that offense. And then Tank Dell is clearly an elite wide receiver as well. CJ Stroud and Tank Dell are great friends. CJ Stroud's talked a lot about how talented he thinks Tank Dell is, and I think there's a very realistic pathway here. It's something that I'm actually kind of expecting to happen, where Stefon Diggs ends up number 3 on this team in targets, and if you're looking at a guy being drafted in the top 25 picks in fantasy drafts this season that could end up in the bottom, or not outside of the top 2 on his own team in targets, it's just not something that's going to add up and really make me super excited about him. Obviously, the ceiling is there, I get it, but I would just rather wait a round and a half and take Tank Dell at the end of round 4. I'd rather take Nico Collins just a couple picks earlier, and there are a lot of other players around these guys that I would just much rather have than Stefon Diggs. Next up in round 4, we've got Keenan Allen, who I think is actually the worst draft pick to make here in the 4th round. And that's actually really tough for me to say because I really do hate betting against Keenan Allen. He's been an all-pro player several times over the course of his career. He's just a legitimately elite NFL wide receiver, and he's somebody that the way he plays, I don't necessarily worry too much about how he's going to fall off with age. But this is just more of a bet for me against rookie quarterbacks supporting multiple wide receivers. It's very rare that we even see a rookie quarterback put up a high-end performance for even one wide receiver. And now on the Chicago Bears, we have 2 wide receivers being drafted in the top 4 rounds, obviously due to DJ Moore and Keenan Allen. And then we can't forget Cole Kmet was a top 10 tight end last season. We know Rome Odunze is going to be involved in this offense, and DeAndre Swift is going to be involved at the backfield as well. So there's just going to be a lot of mouths to feed in this offense, and it's really tough for rookie quarterbacks to come in and put up big numbers. There have only been 3 quarterbacks ever drafted in the top 10 picks to put up over 24 passing touchdowns in their rookie season. It's very rare that you see quarterbacks put up over 4,000 yards in their rookie season. The only quarterback to do both of those was Justin Herbert, and Justin Herbert still only finished as the quarterback 8 that season in fantasy. It's just really tough for rookie quarterbacks to put up high-end fantasy numbers, and for that reason, it's going to be really tough for all 3 of these guys. I'm talking about Keenan, Odunze, and DJ Moore to be fantasy relevant, and I also expect Rome Odunze to get more and more involved over the course of the season. It's just generally what we see out of rookie wide receivers, and that means that we're going to see a less necessary Keenan Allen over the course of the season. We also know Keenan Allen is by no means a young player. He could certainly fall off over the course of the season as well. We sort of saw that with Adam Thielen last season. We also know that Keenan Allen isn't a guy that's necessarily been the most robust. We see him miss several games every season due to a hamstring injury or all that, and I think we'll probably see the same thing again. We're going to continue to see a slight decline in Keenan Allen, and he's still going to be good in PPR formats. Obviously, the Bears are probably going to be one of the pass-heavier offenses we'll see with a rookie quarterback, and it's not going to make Keenan Allen a bad wide receiver, but the ceiling just really isn't there because we don't see rookie quarterbacks come in and put up big touchdown numbers. Like I mentioned, that 24 passing touchdown number is an extremely rare threshold for rookie quarterbacks to hit. The Vegas line right now for Caleb Williams' passing touchdowns is 23 and a half. So we're not going to see a whole lot of touchdowns to go around in this offense. Rome Odunze, he's profiled to be the primary deep threat in this offense. Cole Kmet has emerged as a true red zone threat. We know DJ Moore is going to score, and frankly, I would be shocked if we see Keenan Allen score even five touchdowns this season. And we obviously know that the floor here is extremely low for Keenan. There is a chance that he ends up being the number 3 target on this offense. We don't know for sure that Caleb Williams is even going to be a good NFL quarterback. We're obviously expecting it, given that he was drafted first overall, but there's no guarantee there with rookie quarterbacks, especially in year one. Look at Bryce Young last season. He was the first overall pick, and he was absolutely awful. And on top of that, we know that Keenan Allen's getting a little bit older. He's a bit injury prone. There are just a lot of red flags here with Keenan Allen to be a guy that you're taking in the 4th round. You're probably drafting him to be at least your wide receiver 2, and that's someone that you're really relying on week in and week out. And I just don't know if you're going to be confident doing that with Keenan this season. Next up in round 5, we've got Rashee Rice, who I really think is just obviously the worst draft pick to make here in round 5. And maybe this one's too easy, but I don't even know if this decision of mine is entirely suspension related. Obviously, we do know that Rashee Rice has had some off-field incidents this season, that primarily focusing on that vehicle accident he had while he was speeding. He's likely set up for suspension of some amount this season. I'm not entirely sure what those games are going to be. I'm not going to speculate that, but we do know that Rashee Rice is going to miss time in 2024, and whenever Rashee Rice is suspended, I would expect his ADP to drop pretty significantly. But on top of that, the Chiefs added Hollywood Brown and Xavier Worthy this offseason. On top of that, they still have Travis Kelce, and I just don't think that Rashee Rice is going to be as necessary to this offense with these 2 new additions in Hollywood Brown and Xavier Worthy. That's just assuming those 2 guys can actually get it done at least a little bit. They're replacing guys that were getting meaningful snaps like Sky Moore, like Marquez Valdes-Scantling. We saw Kadarius Toney see the field. Justin Watson was involved. These are not NFL caliber wide receivers that were being thrown into really important roles in this offense, and it's going to make the general passing game just a lot easier on Mahomes this season. On top of that, most of Rashee Rice's production last season really came on manufactured touches. I don't even know that he's actually like a talented route runner at all in the NFL. He ranked 50th in the NFL in win rate versus man last season, just as an example of him not necessarily profiling as a guy that really knows how to get open. He was just really heavily used close to the line of scrimmage. He had more than twice as many yards as he did air yards last season. Very much a guy that was manufactured touches and then did a lot with the ball in his hands after the catch. And that's certainly something that can continue. But if this offense can push the ball downfield more, using guys like Worthy and Hollywood, they're just not going to need to throw to Rashee Rice behind the line of scrimmage as many times this season. And he's being drafted ahead of some really quality players. He's being drafted ahead of Jayden Reed, who I prefer by a mile. He's being drafted ahead of Anthony Richardson and Ken Walker in the same round. Both of those guys have immense upside. And he's also being taken just 1 pick after Mark Andrews, who could very easily be the tight end 1 here. So there's just way more upside with all the players being drafted around him. I think there are a lot of just better players being drafted around him, and on top of that, he's going to get suspended at some point here. So Rashee Rice in round 5 just makes no sense to me. To me, he's more like a round 8 kind of value guy, and just drafting him here doesn't make sense. Next up, we've got another wide receiver we'll highlight, and that's going to be Calvin Ridley, who I think is the worst draft pick to make in round 6. And I get that Ridley's a bit of a polarizing player. We really don't know even how good he is at this point in his career. He finished last season as the wide receiver 27, and he was the true number 1 in that offense. He had the most targets, was utilized downfield, and looked really good at times, and he looked really bad at other times. So it's tough to really know what to expect of Calvin Ridley, the player, but the issue here is just going to be the offense in Tennessee. There's just a ton of target competition in Tennessee, and it's really similar to what I was talking about with the Bears, actually, albeit Will Levis not being a rookie quarterback. It's a situation where we're not expecting there to be a lot of total numbers to go around. I don't know about you, but I'm not expecting Levis to put up a 4,000-yard, 30 passing touchdown season. I think that would be wildly impressive for Levis to do that this season. It's not something that anyone is projecting, and that's kind of what you need for the receivers on this team to pan out, just because there are a lot of other mouths to feed here. We know DeAndre Hopkins, he's still a good enough player that he's going to be involved in the offense. He's probably the biggest touchdown threat on the offense as well. On top of that, you've got Tyler Boyd. He's going to see targets in the slot. They still have Treylon Burks, who's by no means bad. He's probably the wide receiver 4 in this offense now, but he's not a player that's completely worthless. And then on top of that, both running backs, Tajay Spears and Tony Pollard, they're good out of the backfield as pass catchers. And Chig Okonkwo is a pretty good tight end as well. There are a lot of talented pieces on this offense, so maybe Will Levis puts up some slightly better numbers than we're actually expecting, but you're going to need a very slanted percentage of those numbers to go towards Calvin Ridley, and I just don't see that happening. On top of that, Tennessee ranked dead last in pass attempts per game last season. Obviously, that's going to change with their new head coach and Brian Callahan coming over from Cincinnati. Obviously, with them signing Calvin Ridley and Tyler Boyd as well, they are looking to load up the weapons here and try and throw the ball some more. But the problem here is there's just a lot that needs to go right for Calvin Ridley to pay off. You're betting on Will Levis being good, Calvin Ridley actually having a dominant target share, which would be surprising, and then you probably need him to get lucky in the touchdown department as well. You're probably looking at Will Levis throwing between 20 and 25 passing touchdowns this season. Let's just assume a 25% share on the upside for Calvin Ridley, and then you're looking at 5 to 6 receiving touchdowns, and even that's just not going to get you to a super high end performance. I don't see a ceiling here for Calvin Ridley, and the floor is really low because we don't really expect this offense to be good. At least I don't. And I don't even know how Calvin Ridley is going to play. I don't know if he's still a very good player. He just got paid this offseason. And actually, there was this press conference right after he was paid, basically saying that he came there simply because of the money. He didn't mention that he was excited to be a part of Tennessee. He was just like, well, they offered me a lot of money, so it was great to come here. And I'm not saying that that's necessarily a bad thing, but it happens from time to time as well where we see these players that we didn't necessarily know how good they were, get a ton of money, and then they just don't really do a whole lot going forward. I think it's tough for a lot of these guys to be super motivated to continue to get better once they've gotten paid. You can think about guys like Kenny Galladay going to New York. That's the most obvious example. And I'm not saying that Calvin Ridley's that guy. I still think Calvin Ridley's going to be a good player, but there's obviously a red flag there. And just on top of that, you need a lot to go right here. So there's just way too many red flags for me with Ridley. I think he does have a little bit of upside as a player that is talented, but there's just a way too wide range of outcomes, and I'm personally leaning towards that floor case. So I'm definitely avoiding him this season. Up next here in round 7, we've got Jordan Addison, who I believe to be the worst draft pick in round 7. And this isn't a knock on Jordan Addison, the talent. I actually loved him last season. He was one of the players that I actually had listed as one of the best values or best players to draft last season at his ADP. He made that video last season, and I do believe in the talent of Jordan Addison. We saw it last season. He put up 10 receiving touchdowns, and I really do think Jordan Addison is going to end up having a really good NFL career, but generally, I think it's just a good bet to bet against rookie quarterbacks sustaining high-end production for their offense, and especially in a situation where we know Justin Jefferson is going to dominate target share. Like, there's no way Jordan Addison is going to take targets away from Justin Jefferson. Jefferson is going to see a 30% target share in this offense, and it's really tough for rookie quarterbacks to put up high-end numbers. Like I said, that 24 touchdown threshold is extremely difficult for rookie quarterbacks to pass, and if he only has 24 passing touchdowns, I'm talking about J.J. McCarthy, you're probably looking at 4 to 5 for Jordan Addison this season. And remember, Jordan Addison caught 10 touchdowns last season and still only finishes the wide receiver 30. He's being drafted just way too high right now. I don't see a world where he sees the same target share or sees the same amount of targets that he saw last season. This offense probably can't be as pass heavy as it was. They've got a rookie quarterback. You're going to see a situation where Jefferson, I'm at least not projecting to miss the same amount of time that he missed last season, and TJ Hawkinson should return at some point as well. There's going to be a lot of target competition in this offense, and Jordan Addison is not a guy that's going to see north of a 20% target share, and the targets are likely going to be low quality targets from an offense that's just not going to be super good just because they've got that rookie quarterback. So it's just not going to be something that I want to bet on here. I'm not going to bet on a rookie quarterback sustaining more than Justin Jefferson here. He's also being drafted just ahead of guys that I really do like in round 7. You've got David Montgomery and Raheem Mostert in round 7. Both those guys are great picks at the running back position. If you want to take a look at some higher upside receivers, I think JSN's got more upside in this round. Xavier Worthy, who I don't necessarily believe in, but obviously the situation is a lot better. I'd rather take a flyer there. And then also I find that round 7 is just a really great round to take a quarterback. You've got Dak, Love, Kyler all going in round 7. There's a lot more valuable picks that you can make in round 7 than Addison, and I just don't see an upside case. And obviously the floor is a guy that you just can't trust at all this season. So I'd avoid Addison. I still love the talent, but I just don't think it's going to happen for him this year. And last, in round 8, we've got the player that I'm looking to avoid for sure. This is the one I'm most confident in. That's going to be Mike Williams. I did cheat a tiny bit here because Mike Williams is currently being drafted 97th overall, so that's the first pick in the 9th round. But I wanted to throw him in here, and I just don't really think there's any chance that Mike Williams ends up being a player that we're happy with this season. Obviously, he's coming off of the torn ACL. It happened in week 3 last season, so I still think there's plenty of time for Mike Williams to come back and be healthy this season, but I just don't see a world where it really works out for him long term. He's probably going to have a couple of games where he'll catch a long touchdown and be good, but he's the clear wide receiver 2 in an offense that, like I said earlier when I was talking about Garrett Wilson, we do have very much expect this offense to be far more run heavy than what they have been in the past. On top of that, calling him the wide receiver 2 is potentially optimistic because they did draft Malachi Corley in the 3rd round, a player I like quite a bit, and we could easily see Corley be involved and potentially pass Mike Williams in targets this season. We also know that Tyler Conklin's going to be involved out of the tight end position, and Breece Hall is going to be someone they manufacture touches as well. And also, we know Garrett Wilson's going to be a guy that commands a lot of targets. So you're probably looking at Mike Williams as a guy that's going to see 4 to 5 targets a game, and you're going to need a big play or a long touchdown to actually pay off at all. And I think what you're really looking at here is a poor man's Gabe Davis, which is obviously something we're not looking for. He'll be a guy that you can throw in your flex and pray he catches that 50-yard touchdown to make your week, but it's probably going to happen 2 to 4 times this season, and otherwise it's just not going to work out. I don't think he's going to be a guy that you're going to really know when to start ever as well, just because maybe he finishes ahead of his ADP of wide receiver 49. You want to actually make sure you get the value out of that. So if you're in best ball, maybe Mike Williams is an okay pick, but it's something that happens all the time. We have these super boomer bust guys in fantasy, and sure, maybe over the course of the season they finish higher than what they were being drafted as, but you probably didn't get any value out of that. An extreme example here would be Devon Achane from last season. Obviously, Achane put up some really monster numbers last season, but like his first breakout game last season against Denver came. He had like 55 fantasy points, and he was on benches for like 98% of rosters. So even though that happened for him last season, that's great. It didn't really help people in fantasy, and I think the weeks that Mike Williams is going to perform are going to be similar to that. Obviously, he doesn't have that same ceiling, but he's going to be a guy that you just won't have confidence in on a week-to-week basis. You could think back to Gabe Davis last season. Gabe Davis over the course of the season wasn't all that bad, but unless you were just stubborn and played him every single week, you didn't get any of the value out of it. And if you want to be playing Mike Williams every single week, I feel really bad for you here. I don't see a world where that really pans out long-term, and there's just a lot of guys around him that I think are a lot better values. I think David Njoku in round 8 is a great value if you want to take a tight end. There's still some quarterbacks I like. There are a lot of higher upside wide receivers, guys like Jameson Williams. Plenty of wide receivers that I think people are just less name familiar with. So you're seeing Mike Williams go here probably because we're getting to that point where you have people drafting like, ooh, I know who Mike Williams is. I think he can still be a good player. I've heard of him. He's the last player that I'm super confident in here, so people are drafting him. But I think that's more of a name recognition thing. People just feel like he shouldn't be drafted below the guys that are going after him, and I'm basically here to say that he's not going to be good for fantasy this season. I'm in a dynasty league. I've had people trying to trade him around for a third pick. They can't get rid of him. I think well-informed people and people that know what they're talking about really don't want Mike Williams this season, and there's a reason he only got a 1-year deal as well. People are not expecting him to be great long-term in the NFL, so he'll probably have a couple of big weeks. He might be better for the Jets than what he is for fantasy, but you're never going to be confident in him, and I would definitely avoid him this season. So that'll do it for the worst draft picks in every round. Up next, I'll be doing a breakout video. We'll highlight some players that I expect to have breakout seasons. I'll define a breakout season as players having the best season of their career to date, and that one should be a lot of fun. We'll go over busts and sleepers and rookies and all that going forward as well. We'll obviously do some mock drafts and all that going forward as well. There's going to be several videos a week going out for the rest of the offseason. Then we'll get into even more frequent videos as we get into the course of the regular season. So it's going to be a lot of fun. I really appreciate you guys taking the time to watch these videos. Hopefully you guys are finding value in them. If you are, please do give it a thumbs up. It really helps with the algorithm, helps you know that I'm doing a good job. And then, of course, if you haven't subscribed already, please do give me a subscription here. We're super close to that goal of 1,000 subscribers. I'd love to get there by the start of the NFL season. I'm sure we're going to hit it before then, but it's been a goal of mine for a long time, and it's going to be really cool to get there. So I appreciate all you guys. It's been a really great time so far, and we're just going to keep it rolling. So thanks, and I'll catch you next time. Peace. Thank you guys for watching. If you haven't already, please be sure to subscribe to the channel, like the video, check out these other videos here if you haven't. If you want more content, please feel free to follow me on Twitter at RealSteelFFB. I'll be more active on there as the season goes on. Thanks. Catch you later.